Selamat pagi, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to IKA's webinar, Blockchain Technology for Global Social Change, Vadis Indonesia. My name is Arini from Indonesia untuk Kemanusiaan or Indonesia for Humanity. I'll be the master of ceremony for today's event. First of all, let me welcome our special panelists for today. We're pleased to welcome Dr. Jen Thomason, a very special guest from Australia. Hello, Dr. Thomason.
Thank you. I'm
She's a
very pleased to be here.
Yeah, good morning, Dr. Damasen. She's a successful CEO and a founder with successful track record of leadership globally. She also the author of Blockchain Technology for Global Social Change. I would like to also welcome Dr. Agus Trihandoyo, the head of Information System at Technological Department at BRI Institute, who will be our moderator today. And also welcome to Mbak Kamala Chandra Kirana, the head of Indonesia untuk Kemanusiaan Board, and welcome to Sugiarto Arif Santoso as Executive Director for Indonesia untuk Kemanusiaan. And of course, welcome to all participants, and thank you for joining us today. So before we begin, I would like to remind you a few things. That this session will be recorded. Second, there will be interpreter available for those of you who prefer to listen in Bahasa Indonesia. And if you have any questions, please drop it in Q&A section, or you can use the raise hand feature on this webinar. So before we begin today's event, first we'll have the opening speech from a welcoming speech from Mbak Kamala Chandra Kirana. Mbak Nana, the platform is yours.
Thank you, Arini. Good morning, everyone. Selamat pagi semua. Salam sejahtera. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya menyampaikan kata sambutan sepatah dua kata sambutan dalam bahasa Indonesia. Atas nama Indonesia untuk Kemanusiaan atau IKA, perkenankan kami menyampaikan apresiasi atas kerjasama antara IKA dan BRI Institute yang dimulai tahun ini. IKA adalah sebuah lembaga sumber daya dalam lingkungan masyarakat sipil yang menggalang dan menyalurkan sumber daya kepada organisasi atau kelompok masyarakat yang bekerja untuk keadilan sosial, hak asasi manusia, dan keberlanjutan alam. Sumber daya yang kami galang berupa dana, pengetahuan, jaringan, ataupun kerelawanan. Belajar dari perjalanan selama 25 tahun, sejak pendirian IKA pada tahun 1995, kami paham bahwa tujuan keadilan, kemanusiaan, dan keberlanjutan tidak akan bisa tercapai tanpa adanya sistem ekonomi yang menyandang nilai-nilai yang sama. Dalam konteks ini, bersama BRI Institute dan mitra-mitra jaringan IKA, kami memulai sebuah upaya untuk memahami dan membumikan gagasan dan praktik yang disebut ekonomi solidaritas. Pada tahun 2018, seorang pegiat ekonomi solidaritas bernama Emily Kawano menjelaskan hal ini sebagai berikut. Ekonomi solidaritas adalah gerakan sedunia, global movement, untuk membangun ekonomi yang adil dan berkelanjutan. Ini adalah ekosistem yang dibangun dari praktik-praktik yang sudah tersedia di sekitar kita, ada yang sudah berlangsung sejak lama, ada yang baru, dan ada yang sedang baru mulai muncul, yang semuanya sejalan dengan nilai-nilai ekonomi solidaritas. Ekonomi solidaritas mensyaratkan adanya pergeseran dalam paradigma ekonomi, dari yang mengutamakan keuntungan dan pertumbuhan menjadi yang mengutamakan hidup yang selaras antar sesama manusia dan dengan alam. Karena ekonomi adalah konstruksi sosial dan bukan fenomena alami, maka ia pun terbentuk oleh dinamika dalam budaya, politik, sejarah, ekosistem, dan juga teknologi yang saling mempengaruhi. Dari sudut pandang kami di IKA, ekonomi solidaritas tidak cukup dibangun oleh aktor-aktor ekonomi dan kewirausahaan, baik yang berskala besar ataupun kecil. Keberhasilan ekonomi solidaritas juga membutuhkan peran aktif dan kepemimpinan dari organisasi-organisasi masyarakat sipil yang bekerja secara langsung di komunitas secara nirlaba untuk memberdayakan warga yang paling marginal dan yang terpinggirkan dari derap pertumbuhan dan pembangunan. Memang semangat filantropi yang akhir-akhir ini telah berkembang pesat di Indonesia adalah salah satu sarana penghubung antara dermawan swasta dan lembaga-lembaga sosial nirlaba. Tetapi kami yakin bahwa filantropi sendiri tidak akan pernah cukup untuk mengantarkan kita pada kehidupan yang lebih adil dan bermartabat bagi semua, ataupun untuk menjamin keberlanjutan dari berbagai ragam upaya-upaya pemberdayaan masyarakat di berbagai pelosok negeri yang luas ini. Sambil terus mendorong efektivitas filantropi di Indonesia, kita juga perlu membangun keterhubungan yang lebih langsung dan organik antara dunia ekonomi yang for profit dan dunia sosial yang not for profit, baik di tingkat lokal, nasional, dan global. Semua ini dimungkinkan dalam sebuah ekosistem yang menumbuh kembangkan ekonomi solidaritas. Artinya, kita perlu mengembangkan imajinasi baru bersama tentang ekosistem ekonomi solidaritas ini. Revolusi dalam teknologi informasi dan komunikasi telah membukakan pintu selebar-lebarnya untuk menciptakan cara-cara dan jalan-jalan baru dalam mewujudkan ekonomi solidaritas di Indonesia. Kami yakin bahwa BRI Institute bisa jadi salah satu poros kunci dalam proses ini karena kekhasan fokus pendidikannya pada teknologi informasi dan juga karena warisan panjang BRI secara umum selama 125 tahun kiprahnya menguatkan ekonomi rakyat. Pada hari ini, kami berbangga bisa menghadirkan Dr. Jane Thomason, seorang tokoh global yang cukup mengenali Indonesia melalui berbagai kerjanya. Dr. Thomason adalah pelopor tingkat dunia yang tanpa lelah mendorong apa yang disebut sebagai transformasi digital, yang mampu memanusiakan semua manusia sambil merawat alam semesta melalui ekonomi digital. Perkenankanlah saya menekankan pesan penutupnya Jane nanti, yaitu tentang pentingnya membangun ekonomi digital ini di atas landasan etika yang kokoh. Besar harapan kami agar diskusi hari ini dengan Dr. Thomason memberi inspirasi bagi kita untuk membangun ekonomi solidaritas digital di Indonesia, di mana aktor ekonomi maupun aktor sosial masyarakat bekerja sama, mungkin juga bersenyawa, menjadi tonggak pendukung yang handal, berakar, dan beretika, serta berkelanjutan. Di tengah segala kegalauan dan kedukaan akibat pandemi COVID-19, sungguh suatu keistimewaan untuk bisa membuka ruang perbincangan yang inspiratif dan visioner. Terima kasih kepada Ibu Jane atas kesediaannya untuk berdiskusi dengan kita hari ini, dan terima kasih kepada BRI Institute, khususnya Pak Agus dan Pak Rizky, untuk atas kebersamaannya dalam pencarian jalan baru bagi masa depan Indonesia yang lebih baik, yaitu Indonesia yang sentosa, adil, dan berperi kemanusiaan bagi semua. Selamat berdiskusi.
Terima kasih, Mbak Nana. Thank you for the welcoming speech. Now move on to the main agenda of today. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our moderator today, Dr. Agus Trihandoyo. Dr. Agus, the platform is yours.
Okay, thank you. Could you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Mbak Arini, Ibu Nana. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So I'm glad to be here in this webinar organized by ICA, Indonesia for Humanity, civil society organization. So we will discuss about blockchain technology for global social change. Vadis Indonesia ? So this program is a part of collaboration between ICA and BRI Institute, as mentioned by Ibu Nana just now. So my name is Agus Trihandoyo. I will be the moderator for this webinar. So I'm currently lecturer and head of information system and technology undergraduate program at the BRI Institute. So maybe just a brief introduction about our university. So BRI Institute is founded in 2018 by a foundation under Bank Rakyat Indonesia. So our curriculum is a mixture between the information technology and financial business. So we are the first in its kind in Indonesia, the so-called FinTech University. All right, so today's presentation on digital, a world of possibilities by Dr. Jane Thomason. So she will share with us, before we let her share her presentation, I'll give you some background of the speaker today, Dr. Jane Thomason. So she is a visionary leader, social innovator driving digital transformation to reduce inequality and shift to a human-centered digital economy, where she believes in measuring value based on people and the planet, measuring and reporting on impact. She built a new data model with increased individual control and ability to monetize. So this way, it will eliminate social economy disparity. She's the author of several books and most recently, Blog Changing the World. So Jane obtained her PhD in public health from the University of Queensland, Australia, master degree in public health from the University of Sydney, and earlier the bachelor degree on community development from the University of Queensland, Australia as well. So as mentioned before, she has been CEO of Tertiary Teaching Hospital, chair of the board of leading private hospital, senior social sector manager at ADB, Asian Development Bank, and founder and CEO of International Development Company. She also served in the past as a non-executive director of ASX listed bank. She's also very active in a lot of publication and associations. She's a section chief editor and editorial of Frontiers in Blockchain, member of Findexable Data Governance Council. She's active in Industry Associate. She's a member of Center for Blockchain at the University College of London in UK. Co-founder of British Blockchain and Frontier Technology Association, and also correspondent for Corporate Investment Times, Coin Intelligence, and advisor of some association like Kerala Blockchain Association, Africa Blockchain Center of Excellence, Gov Blocks, and Secure Health Health Chain. So for all audience, so we would like to make this webinar as interactive as possible and hopefully fruitful for all of us. So if you have any question, please write it down in the Q&A section there. You will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So Jane, without further ado, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here today. I wanted to share with you that actually Indonesia has been my inspiration for my work in international development. When I was 16 years old, my mother took the 3 children on a community aid abroad Oxfam tour of Indonesia, and we visited their different projects. And I met an Australian social worker who was working with poor communities in central Java, and she'd been there for 14 years. And I was so impressed by what she'd been doing with the poor in Indonesia that I decided that, that was my inspiration for my career. I then actually became an Australian volunteer after graduating from university. And I came to Indonesia for 2 years in 1979. So my relationship with Indonesia is very long, probably longer than some of you have been alive. And I had the privilege of meeting Ibu Nana when I was working on Mampu, an Indonesian women's empowerment program. And I also still am the contractor representative on Compact, which is a governance program working across 8 provinces of Indonesia. So Indonesia is a country that's been close to my heart for many years. And one of the things that I'm so excited about this conversation is that I believe that digital really can change things in a transformational way for a country like Indonesia, in a way that you've never been able to do before. And this opportunity of bringing together a CSO like Ika, who's trying to create this solidarity economy, and the BRI Institute, where you bring the technology and the capacity to be able to convert their desires into technology that's scalable in Indonesia is very powerful. So next slide, please. I can't see the slides, by the way. Are you screen sharing? Is the second, yeah, okay, thank you very much. So we put it on the second slide. So as Ibu Nana's spoken, there's a desire to try and rethink and reconstruct the economy after the pandemic to one that's more inclusive, more socially responsive and ecologically sustainable. And that partnership is between Ika, which is a grant making, just stay on the slide until I ask you for the next one. Stay on the first slide. Yeah, thank you. The grant making to community groups working on social justice and human rights and ecological sustainability, and the BRI Institute, which I was really excited to hear about, being the first fintech university in Indonesia. So what I want to do today is to try and share with you some of the things that are going on around the world, not to say you need to do this thing they're doing in Africa or India, but to say, here's an idea. Think about what it might be able to do if you put it into place in Indonesia. So what I'm trying to do is to give you some ideas, to share with you what's happening in other countries so that you might be inspired by this to think about what you can do in Indonesia. And Indonesia is a country that has embraced technology. You only need to see the use of people on social media, of Grab and Gojek. And as mobile technology rolls out across Indonesia, people are embracing it. And that means you can use it. So please go to the next slide. Yes. So let's talk first about some of the financial mechanisms that are possible, because ICA is a grant-making body. And so let's talk about some of the things that are happening elsewhere. Because what blockchain in particular can do, and digital payments can do, can enable faster, more secure, more accurate transfers than traditional distribution methods like banks and Western Union. So I've given you some examples here where blockchain is being used in different ways in humanitarian settings. So the World Food Programme's Building Blocks program is one of the better known examples where they're using a biometric, which means they're actually using a scan of the eye, although some people are using fingerprint, to create a secure digital identity for people in refugee camps. And they're using that to provide cash and vouchers to the people in camps so they can immediately exchange them at the stores or for courses and so forth. So it's fast, it's secure, and you know that you're reaching the individual for whom that is intended. Another one is an Oxfam project that's actually taken place in Vanuatu in the Pacific, where they used blockchain to try and get distribution of funds after the hurricane. So direct distribution could be done digitally. And this has been on a small scale, but been successful. But as you can see from the slide, they reduced the time to bring people on board to an average of 3.6 minutes per person, in comparison with over 60 minutes during the previous volcano response that hadn't used a digital platform to do it. And actually, in Vanuatu, the government has been so interested in this Unblocked Cash program and the creation of digital identities that they're having discussion with Oxfam about using that method for distribution of welfare payments. So even though it started just for post-hurricane distribution of cash, it's now being explored for greater use for other purposes in Vanuatu. And then another one is the World Vision Sika program, which again was cash voucher distribution in Nepal, which cut down the distribution time from a whole day, given that people would have to walk perhaps half a day to go to the bank to pick up their money and walk back, and it cut it down to a few hours. And in Indonesia, where you have remote populations and they don't have banks, they have to travel long distances to be able to reach a point where they could receive cash. And this is absolutely a problem in Papua and West Papua, and I imagine in some other more remote parts of Kalimantan. So this is very relevant because you can't get cash and vouchers to people quickly using traditional methods. Next slide, please. So mobile money, just in general, one of the things that we've seen during the pandemic is that mobile money has exploded because many countries had shutdowns of the bank, shutdowns of Western Union, and shutdowns of the cash vendors in villages. And so people have been turning to mobile money. And mobile money is more than 50% cheaper than traditional methods, and 21% cheaper when mobile money cash out fees are considered. So it's very competitive, especially for the poor, for low value transactions. And there are a number of new fintechs that you might have heard of, like TransferWise, WorldRemit, and Remitly, that have significantly improved the efficiency and cost reductions in mobile money transfers. Because if you think about what happens if you use a bank, the bank normally will take 3 or 4 days to make the transfer and will charge you substantial fees on that transfer. And then the person you've sent it to has to be able to travel to a bank to receive that money. So mobile money really can make life a lot easier for people who have a mobile phone and are able to receive money using the mobile phone. So TransferWise offers cheaper, faster services and generally can do an international transfer in 24 hours. Richard Ambrose from Azimo said that they saw remittances increase very rapidly digitally during the pandemic, and more than 50% higher than before the COVID crisis. So people have turned to digital. And Crown Agents Bank has been using mobile technology to improve financial inclusion, including their digital bulk payment solutions, and they have developed a reliable, affordable, scalable money solution in Uganda. The next slide, please. One example that really interested me when I was doing some research on what was happening to remittances and social transfers during the pandemic was this one, was that in the Philippines, small business people in villages who did things like they'd buy Spotify cards or Netflix cards and then they sell them to people in the village. So they're micro businesses. When the cash shops shut down, they were not able to get foreign exchange so they could buy their Netflix and Spotify cards. And so what they started doing was using cryptocurrency as an intermediary mechanism to get foreign exchange so that they could receive their Netflix and Spotify cards. In addition, Bloom Solutions, which is a crypto remittance agency, has been delivering crypto transfers across Southeast Asia since 2015 and is licensed by the Central Bank of the Philippines. I'm not sure what the regulatory status is of cryptocurrencies in Indonesia, but I'm sharing this story with you because as the whole broad suite of fintechs, this is a way that actually has helped the poor during the pandemic to be able to continue operating their small businesses. There's also a company called BitPesa in Africa that is spread across 5 African countries now and into several Eastern European countries that uses Bitcoin as an intermediary currency for international transfers, and it has a much lower transaction fee than banks and Western Union. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I think could be interesting for ICA and BRI Institute is thinking about some of the new forms of fundraising that are being used by companies around the world. So one is called Alice.io, and that's a social funding and impact management platform built on the Ethereum blockchain, which aims to bring transparency to social funding. Because one of the things around blockchain and why people get excited about blockchain for financial transactions is it's secure, it's transparent, you can see exactly where it's gone and who it's gone to. And so it's a way that you can raise money and you can show to your donors exactly how their money's being used. So another one that you can also look up on the web is called Munch, which provides digital solutions to mobilise the financial response towards the SDGs. And they pivoted during the pandemic to obviously a COVID response, and they've now have 289 projects looking to raise £45 million for global COVID-19 efforts. And they're completely transparent and they report to their donors exactly how the money's being used. So even that, if you think about ICA as a grant receiving and grant distributing body, if you can provide that sort of transparency to your donors, it's much more likely that your donors are going to be interested in continuing to give you money. Another one of these platforms was developed between the World Wildlife Foundation Panda Labs, which is their blockchain labs, and Consensus in 2019 called the Impact.io platform, which is again looking to create a transparent way of raising and distributing funds for the Sustainable Development Goals. And then finally in China, which is very advanced in terms of technology, fintech and blockchain, and financial has opened a blockchain-powered charity platform called Ant Love, which again allows people to track more transparency around the donation history and distribution. And Ant Love records the donations made by about 450 million Alipay users and connects them to various charitable groups and non-government organisations. Next slide, please. So in addition to that, there are some really interesting new fundraising models that are still in the experimental stage, but I wanted to share them with you because they are really designed for countries like Indonesia and create opportunities for people to both receive digital currencies and earn digital currencies within a token economy. So the first one is Steemit, which was launched, one of the early platforms in 2016. And essentially what it does is users can, from anywhere, can upload content. They can upload stories, they can upload photos, they can upload videos, and they can earn Steem token for publishing their content and for writing their stories. And if people like their stories and they're popular and a lot of people look at them, they can earn more money. And you will see that the top STEAMIT user countries include Indonesia, as well as India, Venezuela, and Nigeria, suggesting that STEAMIT has provided a valuable income earning opportunity for some of the fastest growing emerging markets. The second one, which I encourage you to have a look and go on the platform, is called Good Dollar, which has been developed by eToro. And it's a platform which aims to deliver universal basic income. And so what that means is that you can go on your mobile phone, you can go on the Good Dollar platform, and every day you can request good dollars. So I've been doing it. It only launched in September, but I've been doing it probably since then. And I've got something like 800 good dollars on my mobile phone. And now the Good Dollar has started a marketplace so that if someone says, well, I'll give you $5 if you like my Facebook post, I can earn good dollars, or I can say, I'll write you a post, about your company, and you can pay me 10 good dollars. So first of all, they've distributed the currency, which anyone can get. So you can get on Good Dollar now and you can start earning good dollars. And then they're starting a marketplace so people can exchange and trade. And then the other one is Electronium, which is a cryptocurrency which intention is around financial inclusion. So it's aimed at the developing world. Its wallet is mobile-based and it makes instant transfers. And as of May, there were 1,500 merchants, but there's 4 million wallets who have Electronium in there. And then again, they're starting to create a market for those wallets. So the first thing that they created was partnerships with mobile phone companies. So they give free mobile, or not free mobile phone credits, but you can swap your ETN tokens for mobile credits. And now again, they're starting this something called Any Task, which means that you can undertake work on their platform like Upwork and get paid in ETN, and then they're creating a marketplace. So these things are really interesting to me because they're totally new ways of creating economies and marketplaces and giving the poor access through a mobile phone to a different economy. The next one that I wanted to touch on, because this whole solidarity economy also is concerned about the planet and the oneness of people with the planet. And this is just an example, and there are many. And this is around the green energy peer-to-peer trading, which is, I think, really interesting for small communities where they're not on the electricity grid, and they can become a seller and a buyer of renewable energy through solar panels. So a small solar panel, about the size of an iPad, has become quite cheap these days. And it's possible for people who own a small solar panel using micropayments to sell small amounts of solar energy in a village to charge a mobile phone or to charge a light, for example. So they can produce energy and sell micro amounts of energy to other people in the village to be able to use. An example which I've given there on a bigger scale is the Brooklyn Energy Microgrid, but there are now many examples around the world where people are using solar power and digital payments to buy and sell small amounts of power. Next slide, please. I wanted just briefly to touch on technology for safety, because one of the areas that ECA is interested in is obviously people who are disadvantaged and women and girls. And so I just wanted to give you some examples where technology is being used for safety for women and girls. So India's IT firms are providing safe transport for women employees using vehicles with tracking devices so they can see where the women are and that they get home safely. Vodafone Tech SOS handset alerts emergency services when a woman is subjected to violence, and a single keystroke sends location details and triggers a recording of all activity near the device. And this is information that can subsequently be used in court. And this is currently being used in Spain, Portugal, Ireland, Germany, and the UK. And electronic kiosks in Brazil are using kiosks at stations on suburban rail lines that primarily serve poor communities to disseminate information for violence survivors. So these are just some examples of how people are using technology to try and increase the provision of safe environments for women and girls. The second part of the slide is the issue of human trafficking. So human trafficking is easiest when you have people who have no documentation, who have no identity, because it's much easier for traffickers to take them and to move them. And an example that I just wanted to share with you, but there are many more, is Moldova, which has the highest rate of human trafficking in the world, with hundreds of women and girls being trafficked from Moldova to work as sex slaves. And they're working with Consensus and the UN to stamp out human trafficking. So children attempting to cross the border have their iris scanned, which will alert their guardians, and 2 guardians have to approve their leaving the country. And this is recorded on the blockchain, which cannot be removed by bribing officials. Because one thing about the blockchain is once something is recorded on the blockchain, it cannot be removed and it cannot be tampered with. So this reduces incidents of corruption as well as trafficking. The next couple of slides that I wanted to talk to you about. So we've talked about the financial transfers. We've talked about safety. Now it's just how do we share information and how do we support women and girls and empower women and girls? So this is an example from a platform that's been developed in Tanzania and Kenya, but their desire is that this could be something that becomes global. It's a knowledge sharing and mentoring platform for women and girls globally. So the problem, as they see it, is that there's limited access to mentors, there's a lack of relevant content for women, there's a growing gender digital divide. Young people, young women are seeking guidance, knowledge and information, and there's limited exchange of knowledge by women and limited digital mentorship tools. So they're looking to be able to develop a platform that will solve that problem digitally. So they have developed this platform, a knowledge sharing and mentoring platform for women and girls, to give them access to mentors, connect and network, and share access opportunities, to share, learn and access knowledge and information, manage mentorship groups sustainably, access counsellors and support tools, create digital communities and manage them, showcase products, services, profile and build personal brands, and access digital tools for brand building and positioning to connect and empower women, communities with relevant digital tools. Now, this platform, if it's something that you're interested in, you could build one for Indonesia, but equally, the people who created this platform will willingly make it available for you to repurpose in Indonesian with appropriate cultural images and so forth as something that you could use, because their mission is to connect and empower women globally. So coming towards the end, one of the things that I believe very strongly is that you have an extraordinary opportunity to be able to use social influencing to get that kind of psychological change that will be needed to support the solidarity economy. So already in Indonesia, you probably know people now call Indonesia the Twitter nation. Indonesia is well known for being a very enthusiastic adopter of social media. But what has also happened is that the digital space has become the new battleground for attitudes and social norms and regressive gender roles and stereotypes, and disability and difference are being fought out in Indonesia. So a lot of groups are already using social media to be able to express and engage people with their particular opinions, including digitally savvy religious conservatives, which have huge online followings, collectively over 50 million followers, who often target young women with campaigns that limit the role of female autonomy and the role in public life. And they've also bolstered legislative agendas to undermine civil rights and religious and Indigenous minorities. But as a group of CSOs enabled by technology, you can counter this and leverage digital influencers, faith-based groups, politicians, marketing strategies to run targeted advocacy and social media campaigns to amplify the voice and impact of CSO networks. And if you really want to build this solidarity economy, you will have to have a very powerful social media, social influencing strategy to be in it. The digital space is exactly where you're going to be able to build an inclusive, socially responsible and ecologically sustainable aligned agenda. So, as I said, Indonesia, you have 175 million Indonesians connecting to the internet in 2020, and they average 8 hours per day online, which makes Indonesia the 5th most digitally active country in the world. And almost half the time online is spent on social media, YouTube, WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram, making these digital platforms an important access point for advocacy and engagement. And you can use those. So the kinds of things that you can think about with a social influencing platform for your solidarity economy is to leverage these online communities and support advocates and actors to be more visible and effective, provide capacity building to other CSOs and partners on running effective digital campaigns, including storytelling, messaging, identifying target audiences, choosing the right platform, and using analytics and advertising and tracking and building engagement. Because you can receive the data from your work to understand how effective you're being in different geographical locations with different communities. This will enable you to reach further and wider, drawing on Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram to disseminate information even where they only have 3G or 2G mobile phones. And then storytelling through captivating video. People are moving to shorter concentration spans, and especially where people don't have high literacy, video is a compelling way to get messages across. And you can use all of these platforms to build your campaign for the solidarity economy. Before I close, having hopefully got you excited about the possibilities, also just to remind you that in developing technology, technology has the potential for tremendous good and social transformation, but it also has the potential for harm. So when building technologies, you need to think about ethics in the design of the technology. Because in traditional ethics, a conversation between two people can come up with a conclusion about what's the ethically correct approach. But when you're building this into code, when you're creating algorithms that make those decisions, before that code is built, before those algorithms are built, then you need to think about some of the ethical questions. So these questions are from something called the Blockchain Ethical Design Framework by Cara Lapointe from Georgetown University in the United States. And these are 6 questions that you should ask before you build any technology projects. How is governance created and maintained? How is identity defined and established? How are inputs verified and transactions authenticated? How is access defined, granted, and executed? How is the ownership of data defined, granted, and executed? And how is security set up and ensured? So for any among you who are developers and builders, then this thinking needs to be done before you build the code. And for those of you who are academics, teachers, and thinkers, you need to help the coders and the builders understand what those ethical questions are and what the answers are to those questions so they can build the projects effectively. I believe passionately that it's up to us. We can do this, and especially sitting here talking to ICAR and BRI Institute, this is the perfect combination of the CSOs and the power of community and the vision of the solidarity economy, and BRI Institute with your capability in fintech and your capability in technology. This is for the first time in human history. We have the technological tools. We have the mobile coverage. We can connect to the bottom billion unbanked to the global economy. We can provide digital identity to stateless people. We can direct those benefits to the poor and disadvantaged and women and girls. So we need to harness these tools and our collective ambition to create a connected and distributed ecosystem to transform lives of women and girls and the poor and disadvantaged across the globe and achieve exponential impact. You have 250 million people in Indonesia. You have very high penetration rates of mobile technology. You have very high uptakes with the population with social media. This is your moment to do something at scale, and I hope that you're going to take it. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, and I hope that I've ignited a passion in you to do something really amazing in Indonesia.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jane. That was very insightful sharing. Allow me to summarize a little bit on what has been presented by Jane and provide my thought there. Then we can discuss further. So Jane has presented several use cases of blockchain. First of all, related to financial services such as fund distribution, mobile money to improve the financial inclusion. Also the use of cryptocurrencies as intermediary currency, the new fundraising models enabled by a decentralized ecosystem, but also related to the human trafficking, the paperless identification document on a human trafficking issue. So based on biometric data and blockchain. Okay, before I go further to the second part, maybe okay, these are the first part of your presentation. Maybe I can give some feedback or some comments here. So mobile money transaction has also skyrocketed in Indonesia during this pandemic. So I think everywhere in the world. So Indonesia currently has 4 major fintech players in mobile money. You mentioned earlier Gojek. So we have Gojek has GoPay, for example. they have the second player. Basically, GoPay is the largest or the major operator in terms of mobile money. We have OVO, the second one, and there is Dana as well, and Link Aja. So those are the four major players in mobile money. But there are a lot of licenses also given by the central bank to some other companies, but the market is basically dominated by those four players. Where actually, when we talk about transfer between a bank account and this mobile money, yeah, it takes just a few seconds. See? So you can transfer from your bank account to the mobile money account, vice versa. And according to the report, currently there is more than 55 million Indonesians who are using it. But this solution, this mobile money in Indonesia is currently, this is from fintech players, but backed up by the financial institutions. So basically, the fund itself is in, it's still using fiat currency and backed up by the financial institution. So I wanted to come back first on the cryptocurrency. So my view is that regulators globally are positively shifting their mind into the cryptocurrencies, of course. But there is a shift disparity here. To my knowledge, for instance, in Australia, the regulator is more permissive on the use of cryptocurrency. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I understood. Other governments are more contentious. Some legal restriction on their usage. Others are hostile. Some fully or partially prohibited even, you see, the use of cryptocurrencies. As far as Indonesia is concerned, the central bank, for example, here, prohibited the use of cryptocurrency as a means of payment. Yeah. However, it is permitted to buy and sell crypto as a crypto asset, as a crypto asset, like other asset, like gold, whatever, you see. So this is regulated not under the central bank, but under the Agency of Community Futures Trading Supervisory. We call it BAPEPTI, which is under the Ministry of Trade. So there is quite a number of crypto assets exchange already, exchange provided in Indonesia. I think if I'm not wrong, there is already 3 licenses given, see, 13 licenses given to various companies. But if we use, for instance, cryptocurrency as intermediary currency, for this distribution of vouchers or distribution of money, so converting back to fiat currency through those of those crypto asset, if we are using those existing crypto asset exchange, can be very expensive, basically. So okay, you can buy crypto, yeah, but if converted back, so actually they take the profit from from crypto to fiat. This is what is happening. So for small amount transaction, maybe it's not interesting, it's not worth it. So that's why the mobile money, it's growing very fast. But crypto, it's also growing. The crypto asset, people are investing in crypto assets. Some youth are invested in it, and there is a growth on that. But okay, knowing that you have some experience and also being exposed globally on this thing, I think it would be interesting if you can share with how do you think we should deal with that, differences, in terms of regulation of the different countries, of different government, different regulators. If we were trying, for instance, to implement the humanitarian or social cause, aid or something like that using this crypto. If you want, for example, from international organization or organization in order to distribute, for example, this to help the local community. If we, how does it work? Can you share with us your experience about that? That would be interesting, knowing the local context in Indonesia.
Yes, so I just want to respond. Thank you very much for that kind of excellent explanation. And you're quite correct that there has been, over the last 3 years, quite a range of responses from regulators, from, as you said, just closing it down. On the other hand, particularly smaller jurisdictions like Bermuda, Bahamas, Liechtenstein, Gibraltar, Malta, they've opened up their regulations and they've encouraged people to come and set up their crypto exchanges and businesses there because they see it as a business opportunity. And then others are really working out, and it's interesting your point about the classification, because this is when in 2017 there was really a huge fall following the ICO boom, because the United States SEC said that they were securities and had to be regulated as securities. So there's a lot of debate going on about trying to define what cryptocurrencies are, you know, what stable coins and asset-backed tokens are and so forth, and trying to figure out how they should be regulated. But you're also absolutely correct in that you are seeing, and the pandemic to some extent has really fueled this, because people have become insecure about traditional stores of value. And a lot of people are, I mean, in countries like Venezuela, where their currency is absolutely collapsing, there's a lot of people who've been buying Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to protect their assets. But now you see very, very big traditional asset holders and funds now taking huge stakes in cryptocurrencies to protect their assets as well. So I think we're seeing a real change in how governments and legacy providers are thinking about cryptocurrencies. But having said that, it's actually true that the original people who created Bitcoin were anti-government and anti-bank, and the original uses of Bitcoin, a lot of which were illegal. So it has a very bad reputation. But outside of that history, there are a lot of people who are working on how to use digital assets in a way that can actually create benefit for people outside pure speculation. So that's a kind of a long way to come around to your question, which was, how can we use these things and how can we make the case to government for projects that are going to be able to help the poor? And, you know, I think two things. One is to find the examples, whether in Indonesia or in other countries that would be a suitable comparison to Indonesia, where people are already doing it. So I'll just stick to Electroneum because I spoke to you about Electroneum. Try and think about that as an example. If you can see a way that, you know, having people using Electroneum in Indonesia is going to be able to help you get resources to the poor and enable them to participate in markets they haven't been able to participate in, for example, or do cash transfers, make the case built on some evidence of something that's already happened. Or, you know, obviously there are other things like the universal basic income, which you could similarly experiment with in Indonesia. But for me, the absolute obvious one is the village law, and all of these funds that are transferred by the government to the villages for their development. If there was a way to be, because you think about it, you can track those funds right down to the recipients in the village. You can see how the villages are going to be able to use them. You can get data back on how those funds have been spent and how the development outcomes are in those areas. That would be so powerful if there's a way of being able to use it in the Indonesian setting. And then, of course, I mentioned Papua and West Papua, which are geographically so difficult that surely the ability to be able to maybe use these tools could change the development face of Papua and West Papua.
Okay, okay. Just maybe to my knowledge, the government of Indonesia currently use also those how you call it, those fintech players and mobile money to disburse some aid to the to the poor people, to the people who need, they are using the mobile money for that. So basically, because the penetration, as I mentioned earlier, of the mobile money is quite high, and the usage is quite quite important. Apart from the using the banking institution like BRI. So BRI, for example, has some have a lot of agents. We call it the banking agents everywhere, all over Indonesia. So for region where we don't have, for example, the internet access, for people who don't have the internet access or don't have the mobile phone, for example, those banking agents actually serve as the how you call it, as the intermediary in order to access the population on those remote areas. So this is what this is what the Indonesian government is doing right now. Okay, I will go on the second part of your presentation, which is on the gender inequality, discriminatory laws and social norm where women remains underrepresented at all levels of political and economic leadership. So in this area, you envision to connect and empower women communities with relevant digital tools. So social influencing to connect the unbanked to the global economy, also to provide digital identity to stateless people, particularly women and girls. So of course, blockchain use case for this digital identity is something which is progressing around the world. I think there is also some use case being tested in Indonesia. So the various data model with increased individual control have been proposed. Blockchain, of course, is known as immutable, more secure, because it's based on an open and decentralized system. So could you elaborate further on this initiative, in this global initiative? So how civil society organization like ICA or also academia can join and contribute this initiative?
Yeah, well, I think interestingly enough, only today I was on a call earlier with a group of humanitarian organizations from around the world. And I believe I sent you the report that they did looking at how blockchains are being used in the humanitarian sector and talking about how it could be improved, whether it's the digital identity or the voucher and cash transfers and so forth. And in fact, this was a meeting to talk about how to set up a global collaboration to be able to build or create or, co-design something that is suitable for social and humanitarian purposes. Because what their research found is that a lot of the platforms that are in existence don't quite fit the need for social and humanitarian requirements. So that's one collaboration that's just starting up now, and I know that they would welcome participation and partnership from Indonesia to be part of that. I think the other thing, because especially with the FinTech University, getting the knowledge out is quite difficult in that technology is moving so fast and people are doing things all over the place with hundreds and millions of people. It's really hard to get proper evaluations of what's going on and what happened and what were the benefits and what were the negative consequences. And so, even if one of the things that BRI Institute was doing is documenting and sharing what Indonesia's learning about its digital economy and fintech in Indonesia and the benefits to people or not, then that would be an incredibly useful contribution. And just joining this international dialogue because, I mean, the discussion about the solidarity economy, I haven't heard the term before, but I've heard people all around the world saying, we've got to stop this profit-driven economic system. The pandemic has taught us we have to put people at the centre and we have to look after the planet. So, you know, I'm really happy to connect you to those dialogues, because I think you could make a tremendous contribution.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any question from the audience? Not yet. Okay, the next one that I want to discuss with you is on the, you mentioned that the objective of your presentation is to rethink on the reconstruction of the economy post-pandemic. So toward what is more inclusive, socially responsive, and ecologically sustainable. Yes, this is very relevant to the situation that we are facing right now. So we are in the midst actually of the 3 global crises at the same time, right? We are a pandemic, crisis, a recession, you know, and a climate change. Yes. So COVID-19, as we know, has infected more than 67 million people all around the world, and has taken life of 1.5 million people in the world. So, and the global economy has plunged. So I believe that, blockchain combined with other technology, of course, such as Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, etc., will disrupt a lot of aspects on the way of we do things, you see. So in the context of the situation that we are facing today, you published recently a book, right? About what? Entitled, if I'm not wrong, The Block Changing the World. Can you share with us the main lines of your vision on this recent book that you wrote?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, in a way, the book is more of a story of how I came to get involved in blockchain, why I became so passionate about it, and the experiences that I've had. As part of that story, I also share where I see the opportunity and when I've seen hope and excitement and change and all of those things. But also, I think what it expresses, and this is important, because when you start saying we're in the middle of these crises, it's true, the pandemic, the economic recession, the climate change, it makes you feel depressed. But I hope that my book is an expression of hope, that, if you have a vision and if you're determined and if you're prepared to do something about it, then you can do a surprising amount. And I think that the same thing, if you think about Indonesia and you think about the opportunity, if you got all of the CSOs together, for example, and you think of the many hundreds of millions of people who are engaged with CSOs, and you're able to start influencing people's thoughts and influencing the way that they're wanting things to be happening in the world, in the economy, and in terms of climate. And if you then band that together with some projects that you could be doing at BRI Institute, then, these are things where, even though you can't change the entire face of Indonesia, within the areas that you can influence, then you can have a significant impact. So influencing social norms and ideas and being thought leaders in this area, and then building some of the technological pieces, and through the CSOs, expanding and getting that voice and reach out there is something very powerful that the people sitting in this room today could be doing.
Thank you very much for sharing your, the main line of your books. I would be interested soon to read your book through the Kindle. So I think it's available on Kindle, right?
It's very cheap. I wanted it to be accessible because I wrote a book called Blockchain Technology for Global Social Change, and it was $260, so no one could read it. So this one's very cheap. Everyone can read it, even for free. You can look at it.
Mm-hmm. All Right. Okay, I will leave now the question to the audience. So there is already, I think, one question here. Hold on. This is from Ika, okay, from Pak Sugiarto. Okay, saat ini kami sedang currently we are developing a solidarity economy model, but the hurdle is that it's very difficult for community to understand the digital algorithm. How could you share with us what is the first step in order to apakah Anda bisa sharing bagaimana hal mempengaruhi pentingnya digital sebagai hal penting? How can you share with us how can we influence, you know, as the first step, you know, this the importance of digital for those community? Because I think Pak Sugiarto here mentioned about what happened in the field, the difficulty of convincing the community about this digital space. Of course, I imagine if we are talking about poor people, you know, community, etc. I think digital is far from their world. You know, based on your experience, how do you approach that? How other people in other part of the world address this educate this digitalization to the communities?
So I think the starting point always has to be find a problem that they have that they need to be solved. So don't start with digital, don't try and explain blockchain, don't try and explain algorithms. But if you use that example that we were speaking about, let's say, we did a use case in Papua New Guinea around digital transfer of currency using blockchain and mobile phones. But at the moment, the people in this village that we went to, if they get sent money, they have to hire a bus and take 6 hours to go to the nearest centre where there's a bank or a Western Union. Then they have to, the second day, actually go to the bank and get the money. And then the third day, get another bus to go back. So if they had $200, let's say, it takes them 3 days to go and collect it, $120 in bus fares, and then probably the bank or financial institution has taken another, let's say, $30. So they end up with $50 in their pocket, having spent 3 days. So if you say to someone like that, oh, look, I can get you this on your mobile phone and then you can go and exchange it at the store for either money or store goods, I think they're going to go, that would be great. But the point is that we shouldn't be building solutions that are just our good idea about solutions. The point is that whoever it is we're trying to reach, if we can understand what the nature of their problem is and we can give them something that solves that problem, they will welcome it. And that's the evidence from many, many other countries. You don't start with the technology, you start with what's the problem they need to solve. They can't get their goods to market, or they can't get paid in time for their goods, or they can't get an identity so their child can go to school. Solve their problem. And that's how you'll get people to embrace it. And I think the pandemic has been such a good example, because there were many things we wouldn't do before the pandemic, but suddenly we were locked down. The children had to use Zoom to go to school. We had to use Zoom for meetings. Doctors had to use telehealth. All of these things that were very hard to get people to do before, everyone's doing because we all had the same problem. So start with the problem.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah, I think technology is just a tool, right? Basically, yeah. I think we should focus on what is the problem, understand the community, what is the problem, how. Then once we identify the problem, then we try to find the right solution, whether blockchain or not, or whether other technology could fit to solve the problem. But I think first thing first, we need to understand, to state the problems. Yeah. Okay. The second question comes from Aya Octaviani. So what can we do for developing countries' government to be able to counter the strength that private currencies will give the private companies behind them, as the USD strength give the US government large financial powers over the other countries?
I think that's a very interesting question, because I mean, the country to watch and the currency to watch at the moment is, of course, China, who are rolling out their central bank digital currency and will roll it out not only in China, but they will roll it out in the 60 Belt and Road countries. So that in its, I'll come to the private currencies, but that in itself is going to create some instability in the global financial system, which since World War II has been backed by the US dollar. So there's a lot of very destabilizing things going on at the moment. So you have that. But then you have, as I think you're alluding to, groups like Facebook, who've got over 3 billion members, who announced the Libra coin and are potentially going to allow, essentially create a Facebook digital economy. And then what this does to the stability of the global financial systems and how governments can regulate is a big question. And then the other issue with blockchain in particular is the fact that it doesn't have to be physically located in a particular jurisdiction. So it's multi-jurisdictional, and you have smart contracts sort of executing decisions. And when those decisions go wrong, who's responsible for the problem? And so it's creating questions that we don't have an answer to, and are really going to challenge governments and global regulators to try and think through what is the best way that they can protect their citizens, but also give the benefit to their citizens of potentially what these platforms are offering people. So I think it's a great question, and I don't have an answer for it. And I think when you look at the 4 biggest platform companies in the world, effectively they have economies that are, I think, smaller only than the US and China. So we keep thinking about countries, but if you think about these platform companies as economies, it changes the way you think about the world, and then it challenges you to think about global governance, because we come from a history where we think of a physical location, which is a country, who's going to look after the needs and wants of citizens. But we're in a world now already where you have these supranational global economies that exist and are operating. So it's a great question. I don't have the answer, but you're correct to have identified it.
Yeah. All right. The next questions comes from Rini Nasution. There is already several pilot on the use of blockchain for face recognition, for cash and voucher disbursement, but this is all in the small scale. How do you think this could be scaled up? So it could be implemented at this national scale. So the social support, from the can be given or can be disbursed directly to the user, to the beneficiary, and reduce the potential of corruption. So basically, how to scale up those small scale piloting on this disbursement using blockchain?
That's also a good question, and that is exactly what this group that I spoke about doing the humanitarian work are trying to solve at the moment for humanitarian settings. But because blockchain is still a relatively new technology, and most of the existing platforms aren't actually going to work. They either won't be fast enough, they won't be able to do the volume of transactions needed, or their cost model is not right or inappropriate or too costly for something like, getting money to 72,000 poor villages in Indonesia. So that's a problem that people are absolutely working on. And you know, I think that there's some ways that we can look at it, because, you know, when I was working with Bappenas and the Poverty Secretariat in Bappenas, and we were having a brainstorm about, you know, how you create digital transformation in Indonesia. And it's very hard to think about how to sit above 250 million people and, you know, come up with the plan. But what we came up with, and I mean, I'd welcome your input on this, is start with a kind of bite-sized piece. And if you look at Estonia, which is a very small country, but they've become one of the most digitalized countries in the world from nothing, from having not widespread internet, not widespread digital literacy. They came out from under Russians and they decided they were going to build a digital economy. And they made a roadmap and they decided what they needed to do first and second and third over 10 to 15 years, and they did it. So my proposition to you to think about is, don't start at the national scale. Work with a district. Work with a district where you've got a really motivated Bupati who wants to create that kind of transformation for his district, and kind of break it down, as Estonia did, into what's the situation now, what hardware do we need, what software do we need, what education do we need, what do we need in terms of building the talent, and what are the sectors we're going to do first. So I think that's something worthy to consider. So we made our this project #500 Estonias, because you've got that many districts and you're so much bigger than Estonia. But I do want to say a word on the identity piece, because this is simple and it's complicated. It's simple because it's easy to do. People have mastered that. They've figured out how you can take an iris scan or a fingerprint and hash it up securely in an encrypted way onto a blockchain. That's done. That's not a problem. What is the problem is, and if you look at Indonesia, I think you've only got something like 36% of the population who have a fully registered identity. It's quite low. It might have gone up from 36, but it's not high. But you have multiple government agencies who are involved in officially registering a birth. So the hospital can't register it, they can only notify it. And then you have, you know, the Ministry of Home Affairs, and you have other ministries that are justice and police and so many different groups all getting involved in the issuance of this identity. So the problem's not, you can make a biometric identity really easily. How do you actually get it acceptably integrated into your current system of registration? That is actually the problem.
Yeah, you're completely right that we should start by you know, small scale piloting, you know, in a certain area. Yeah, that should be something that we should do. Okay, coming back to the identity, basically Indonesia now has already what we call the e-identity. So it's a smart card base. It's a chip based kind of card where your fingerprint is recorded there. You know, your fingerprint is recorded in this smart card, and this is also contactless. You see, contactless, and so far that's addressed basically people who are eligible to have e-identity, which is you know, above 17 years old. You see, when it comes into birth, you know, the new babies, when the new baby births, yes, actually the identity just comes from the hospital, then comes from the local government. So that's what it doesn't go yet to the electronic database, probably, you know, because until you're eligible to register and have your fingerprint recorded there, or your other biometric data recorded there. Yes. So this is so it's progressing. It is progressing. I mean, so for instance, there is Dukcapil, which is under the Ministry of Home Affairs, who actually keep the data of the population. If I just, I just mentioned to you about the EID, the e-identity. So this is actually kept by the Dukcapil under the Ministry of Home Affairs. And for example, if fintech companies receive potential customers who want to borrow from the fintech because they don't have access, for example, to the formal bank. So basically, Dukcapil open up the data to those fintech players. So, and this is happening, and this is something which is already done, which is already in place. And there is also some interesting things about the digitalization. We know that the mobile operators, you just mentioned that already. Yes, you're completely right that the penetration rate of mobile internet is very high in Indonesia, and mobile operators actually started to produce data. Do produce data of the people, of course, with their consent. If there is a pre-agreement, so the person has to agree first that their record will be their data will be recorded, their movement, whatever. So based on this data, basically they do a kind of the analytics and provide those data or sell those data, not the raw data, but the processed data or the scoring, I would say. More or less, is the scoring of a particular person to the fintech players that allow them, for example, to receive or whether they are eligible to have credit, to have loan, something like that. That one parameter. So it's not only banking parameters, but also the person identity and the person activity data, which is captured from these mobile phone operators. So this is something that is happening, and among the fintech communities in collaboration with the telecom operators. Yeah.
Can I just make a? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to kind of raise a couple of points, around things to think about in relation to data and databases that you and your students might be keen to debate and think about. So one is the issue about a centralized database anyway holding identity data, and you're possibly aware that India had one of the largest hacks of their Aadhaar identity database and had something like 300,000 identities stolen from the centralized database. So one of the reasons that proponents of blockchain promote blockchain is that it's distributed, so there's no central database to hack. So that's just a thought to share. The second one is the issue around consent and ethics and fintech. Do people really consent to having their data aggregated, used and sold to other people? Or did they just tick a box because they wanted to get that service? So there's a whole debate going on at the moment about data ownership, data rights, data privacy, data security. So is it right that the telco gets my data and sells it to someone else for money, and I don't get any money for my data? So these are kind of debates that are raging all around the world. So since you were talking about that, I just thought it's worthy of putting that question mark on the table. So I think one is the centralized database risk. The second one is really thinking about ethics and fintech and data storage use and so forth. And the third one is around consent and whether really informed consent does take place when people just tick that click and say, yes, I accept cookies and I accept your rules that they haven't read for sure. So I share those back.
Yeah. So, this personal data privacy is something that it's a hot topic at the moment, among everywhere, and also in Indonesia. Indonesia is for the last 3 years, I follow this thing for 3-4 years. has been trying to have regulation, the law on the personal data privacy. Basically, it doesn't exist yet. There is no law, no such law, and this is progressing. This is something that I think the Parliament is working on. Probably they're targeted to have it by next year. If things goes normally. And also the second thing is the awareness of the people. I think we need to educate also. I think the community has to educate as well on the data privacy. People access Facebook and showing everything about their private life, about their family, or what they're doing, all these kind of things, and because they don't know the consequences of this thing. They don't know, and like you mentioned, others may take advantage of that. I mean, other maybe for good purpose, but also for the other side, for the bad purpose. This is something like something bad may happen. So this, I think, the community, like this civil society organization, should be a part of this action to educate on the importance of this data privacy. Yes, I agree with you on that. And okay, there is other questions here. Okay, from Ibu Ninuk Wiliani, who is also faculty member of DRI Institute here. In your opinion, how Bitcoin can support development of small and micro business in Indonesia?
Okay, that is a very tricky question to answer. I gave you the example of how it was being used in the Philippines during the pandemic, because it was, again, solving a problem that the micro entrepreneurs had, that they couldn't get foreign exchange to buy their Netflix cards and Spotify cards. I'm not certain, being really honest, that Bitcoin as one cryptocurrency. So just remember, there's hundreds of different cryptocurrencies that are all different. Bitcoin was the first one. It's sustained for over 10 years. It has, although it's been volatile, it has gone up in value, and anyone who's following it will know that it's hit the US $20,000 mark again. But I would not personally be promoting that as a solution for the poor in Indonesian villages, because it's too risky, it's too volatile. But digital, crypto, ways of them accessing the economy, accessing information, being able to share their skills, any of those problems that they currently are not dealing with, then I think that some element of blockchain or crypto or digital assets can help. But it's really understanding the problem and then figuring out how to solve it. I would not be recommending that the villagers take their $100,000 in village funds and put it into Bitcoin. That would not be my recommendation.
You're right. Yeah. Okay, there is another question. Oh, this question is likely addressed to me, to Pak Agus mentioned. Okay, what is the government response towards blockchain? In a sense, are we ready to have it, knowing that blockchains has also the possibility to disrupt, certain sector of industry, like the bank, for instance. Probably Jane can also elaborate about the challenges and showing some by examples on use cases that mentioned earlier. Maybe from my side first, because she asked me also my opinion on this. What is the government response? So blockchain is just a technology. So basically it depends on the use cases. So the government doesn't regulate you should not use blockchain, because blockchain is like AI, whether you are, AI or analytics or whatever, it's just a technology. So there is no regulation on blockchain. It all depends on the use case. So how do you use it? Is it? It depends on the usage, on the use case of the blockchain. It could go into certain regulation, whether it comes from central bank, if it is related to the payment, or whether it is related to the OGK, if this is related to how you call it, to financing, these kind of things. There is no regulation at the moment related to the use case of blockchain, apart from the case I mentioned earlier as a cryptocurrency. So the use case of blockchain as a cryptocurrency, yes, is prohibited, as a mean of payment or a legal tender in Indonesia. But blockchain is authorized, as a digital asset, or we call it the crypto asset. And this is under a different regulator, which is Bapepti, which is under the Ministry of Trade. So Jane, probably you could have your input here on the challenges, that other part of the world that you mentioned here on the blockchain implementations.
Thank you. Look, and that's an important question to ask. And for me, it comes down to thinking about ethical questions. And I actually recently wrote a paper on ethics and blockchain, which I'm happy to share with you, because let's talk about, because ethical questions are usually questions there's not an absolutely right answer to. There are two things that you're discussing and you need to come to almost a moral judgment about what's right. But let's just stick with the banks for the minute. So let's just speculate around the village funds. So the government of Indonesia has allocated a very large amount of funds to go to the 72,000 poorest villages. I don't have in my head the total amount of funds, but let's just say it's 100,000 per village. And that money is intended by the government of Indonesia to be used by that village for their economic development. So if you have currently a situation, let's say, where that money is being moved through a series of middlemen, banks and, cash merchants or others, depending on that actual chain. And in total, from the $100,000, those middlemen are taking 20%. So they don't get $100,000. 20,000's been wiped out by the people who are taking the money down the chain. So is that right? If the government could give $100,000 and the village could receive $100,000, is that better than the banks and other middlemen taking $20,000? So the answer is yes, but what about those middlemen? Is it right that they now lose their jobs because you're able to directly transmit that money to the villages? So I think that your question is important because it causes you to stop and think about the implications of a technological decision. Just because you can, does it mean you should? And so, that's what I think at that level the question should be about, is what level of disruption is going to give greater benefit, like get the $100,000 to those communities, with other people who are decent, hardworking, honourable people that now will lose their jobs. And I think that's what it comes down to. And there's no right answer to that. It's just the criticality of government and academics and technologists and communities having that debate.
Mm. Right. Yeah, I think that that kind of debate should be among these communities, CSO, academics, Yeah, I mean, I remember on many years back when I was at the university when I was studying the same thing. At that time, we have been talking about what machine learning, all this artificial intelligence, all these things, and about the ethical aspect of it. You see, so okay, at that time, okay, the artificial intelligence is not new. Basically, it's something like already more than 30 years ago, and there is things are developed, but that now it becomes in our everyday life. That's because of the power of computing, of course, and also the power of communication, power of internet, all these things. But at that time, we were discussing a lot about the ethical point of view. How can we use the implication if we use artificial intelligence on the society, on our aspect of life. But now, at the end of the day, use cases are there. There is certain things that we can do. I mean, make use of this for our better life, of course, to make our life better. But there's certain things that we cannot do. Of course, I mean, at the end of the day, like blockchain, probably, yeah, blockchain has a vast, how you call it, potential application or potential use cases. In at the end of the day, people are trying here and there, and use cases are being developed. And at the end of the day, there will be certain use cases that might be very useful, and certain use cases will disappear like this at the end of the day, right? But the thing is that, yeah, the new technology is there, so we need to get used to it. We need to use it. We need to try it, and for the better of humanity. At the end of the day, technology is just a tool, like I mentioned earlier. Yeah, right.
But could I just add one comment, because
Yes.
I wanted to say that we don't have the privilege or the luxury of time. The technology is exponentially increasing in its pace of development, and the regulators learned that at their peril, because before the Facebook Libra coin announcement was made, they were all sitting back and going, well, we'll discuss and we'll debate and we'll think about it. And they weren't understanding how fast they needed to move. And then when Facebook announced the Libra coin, they sat up in horror because they realized that they couldn't control this. And so I think that this is a message for the audience and for government and for regulators. You don't have time to sit back and deliberate, because this technology is being built and it's being taken up by people, and you need to work fast. You need to work with CSOs and academics and technologists to figure out how you're going to manage this, because it is an absolutely exponential growth and we don't have time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Hopefully, everywhere in the world now, the authority, like these financial authority regulators, they have some kind of what we call the sandboxes, to try,
Yes.
Everybody is learning together, basically, everybody is learning together. These things is coming, and regulators, government are learning at the same time as the players, as everybody. So hopefully, we since 3-4 years ago, probably, 2016, in Indonesia, the central bank already set up sandbox entity, but also in the OJK, the Indonesian Authority of Financial Services, also set up sandboxes. So when people got an idea, implementing a certain technology or new business model, so they are allowed to to experiment this in a specific for specific number of users, or for specific use cases, and they learn together. So basically, the regulators learn together at the same time with the academia, with the industry players, and they're open to this. This is something which is also happening all around the world, right? That this sandbox concept. Yeah.
Mm.
Any other questions from participant? further questions, maybe there is no other question. I don't see anybody, unless I missed it. No, I don't think so. So maybe your closing remarks of all this discussion that we have. Would be here. We will be pleased to hear your closing remarks. Before we end our session, our webinar.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me in this conversation. As I said in the beginning, I think that this is the beginning of a really exciting partnership between BRI Institute and ICA. And I think that I hope that this discussion has started to give you some ideas and some thoughts about how you can take it forward, because I think there's huge power in the sort of CSO movement, together with the people who are building the technology to solve social problems, but also to influence social attitudes. And I think it's the combination of solving the problems and influencing the attitudes which is going to be key to building the solidarity economy. And I think everyone can do their part. But the first thing is to open your mind to the possibility and imagine that the future doesn't have to be the same as the past, because we have the tools now that can enable it to be different. So be inspired about this. Think about, even if you like one idea we talked about today, go away and think about it, discuss it with your colleagues, and then think about where you can start to make a difference, whether it's in education, whether it's in building something, whether it's in developing talent, or whether it's in doing some kind of fintech solution with BRI. All of those things are going to add up to something powerful. But if you have more ambition, then I encourage you to think about that idea of partner with a district. Work with a district which has got a forward-thinking Bupati who wants to be your sandbox and do some things that make a difference to real people.
Thank you very much. Your presentation has been very inspiring for us. And then I hope this discussion, will broaden our knowledge, and knowing what are happening in other part of the world, and what other people are thinking about that. Then and it opened up our mind also to the speed of the technology, which is tremendous now, and we have to be ready with all these things, and how, at the end of the day, how to apply this thing to our life for humanity, for this social solidarity economy, like mentioned Ibu Nana earlier. Okay, so I maybe I stop here. I end up this discussion here. This discussion here. Then I will pass it back to Mbak Arini. So over to you, Mbak Arini.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Agus Handoyo, for facilitating our webinar today. Everyone, we are at the end of the webinar. Let me thank our panelists and moderator. Thank you so much, Dr. Thomason and Dr. Handoyo, and also our interpreter, Mas Adam. Thank you very much. On behalf of the team, I want to say thank you for all the participants who joining us this webinar through Zoom and through YouTube. I'm Arini signing off, and hope to see you soon on another event by ICA. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.